Welcome, everyone, to this amazing gathering of older women. We are crones, we are hags, and we are elder wise women of power. We're coming together so that we can explore what it means to move into this rich and powerful part of our life in a way that really honors the authenticity of who we are and feels into the wisdom that we can bring to share within the world. I'm Alison Palmer. I'm your host, and I'm so delighted today to introduce to you Leah Lamb. Now, you can read Leah's bio underneath here. It's all there, so please do, because then you're going to understand what she does in the world and the wisdom that she's bringing to share and all the experience that she's had as well. I will share a little bit about her so you have some context. So Leah is a story practitioner and she engages story as an ancient tool for healing and for transformation. Leah leads sacred storytelling ceremonies and she's also a widely published writer. And on top of that, she's the founder of the School for Sacred Storytelling. And we're going to be talking today about Wise Women Speak, finding your wisdom by telling your story, which is so exciting. So welcome, Leah.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so inspired that you're doing this. It's one of the things that crushes my heart is when I get to be in the space with women who are older and say that they don't have a story to tell. And I'm just like, what? You've lived so much life. You've lived so much life. And maybe you just haven't been given the context to understand how meaningful it is. And so I just love that you're creating space that honors this and brings us back to remembering that like we need all of each other and all the aspects of our lives and that once we get over a certain place, we have a lot more to give. And yeah, thank you for including me in this.
Oh, well, we're honored that you're here. And this topic, I think, is just so fascinating and amazing and powerful. And so I can't wait to dive in and explore it more with you. You know, wise women speak, finding your wisdom by telling your story. And the work that you bring to the world is sacred storytelling. So perhaps that's where we should start, so that we can understand what sacred storytelling actually is. And perhaps you can weave into that, like how you became a storyteller.
I just feel inspired to bring a little couple of musical notes for some reason. So whenever in you is inspiring that in me, and just to say, like I I think we all have a song in our soul that wants to be sung, and it comes through our stories. And when we're given the space, like you just created, it literally just called my song out. This song was just like, sing me. I've never heard that song before. So that's like the resonance of us together.
Oh.
And and in terms of like how I came into storytelling and how I came into getting to be able to do that, I don't know, like a combination of luck, ferocity, good community, some good teachers, and a very active unseen world, whispering in my ears, pushing me forward. And I really consider myself so grateful. I grew up in a farm in Vermont. And, one part of the story might be, oh, I was neglected. I was a child of latchkey child. We didn't even have a key to our house. It's in rural Vermont. It's like the doors were always open. We had 40 acres of land. My parents were very, very busy and full. But what it gave me, it's like we can go into the story of what we didn't have, but what it gave me was it gave me so much freedom and space to wander in the wilds of our 40-acre farm, to go into the creeks, to go into the forests, to get lost, to find the bones, the beginning of spring as the snow melted. It gave me a spaciousness to be in my creativity, to be in my deepest listening, and to really be in my own consciousness, for better or for worse, and kind of undisturbed. And how many of us get that in our modern day world? I just opened my computer this morning. I'm at a dear friend's house. I opened this computer. We're in this beautiful mountain town, and I saw like 20 different wireless signals coming at me. And I'm like, tell me that doesn't like affect my brain and my consciousness when all this energy and bombardment is like coming at us. So, when you ask me like where did it begin, it really began with a relationship with the natural world. And it began, my father was a veterinarian. We were in rural Vermont. And so it began with a story of connection, of service, of devotion to, and really seeing all beings as worthy of dignity and respect. And my
Mm.
father's a really wonderful veterinarian. And as a child, I got to see this interspecies connection and relationship. My stepmother also really cared for the land and cared for that. And so that was part of it. And then my mom was an artist, a painter. And so I was given this, also implanted with the seeds of it's perfectly natural and normal to pursue yourself as an artist. And she fought for that, and so I was able to stand on her shoulders. It wasn't a fight for me to go into the arts or creativity. It was a gift, and I was
Wow.
very lucky to have some natural talents seen and recognized and fostered. And I mention all these because these were the breadcrumbs to my creation, and I feel like we can help others, walk, throw back some breadcrumbs, and we can also um, cultivate in ourselves what we weren't always given, and by noticing, okay, what happened. And part of my journey was going and studying theater professionally in New York City. I, and I, at a very young age before that, though, part of my story was that I moved every year. So while I grew up on that farm in Vermont, I moved every year of my life until I was 13, because my parents were separated and living in different states, and it was a different school every year. And when you're the new kid in town, it's one thing to be a new kid in town like once, but every year it's a thing. And it was very, very hard for me to socialize as a young person. I mean, and so I, uh, books were my salvage. They were my sanctuary. They were my escape. They taught me what other people around me weren't teaching me. You know,
Yeah.
and when my best friend in high school committed suicide, then the place where I'd always gone for other people to tell me the story, when I was now living in a story that I couldn't comprehend or make sense of, and when there weren't adults around me who were able to come into a conversation of grief and loss and the unexplainable at that age, I went to the sanctuary that had always protected me up until that point, and that was storytelling. And that's when I really began to begin a journey of telling my own story and
Mm.
writing my own story and going to the realm of story to help me make sense of my human experience. And
Wow.
I'd never had that before.
Wow.
And so that would become something that would carry me through life. When I was in my 30s, how do I get through, this love journey? I would end up going to the realm of story. It's like, show me. And so
Wow. That's very powerful. And at the right near the beginning, you said several times about choosing the story that you tell about your life and the different things that happen to you. And I really like that. And I wonder, what for you is the difference between storytelling and sacred storytelling?
stories, we're surrounded by stories every day. It's a story I'm telling myself. It's a story of your projection of me and what you see in me. It's a story of news and what about the outer world. And all of these stories are coming from somewhere, and they're coming from someone that has an intention. And when we talk about what sacred storytelling is, the intention as I understand it, what are we saying when we're saying that something is sacred? We're saying, I honor the divine, the divinity in you. I honor the life inside of you. So when I say I'm carrying a sacred story, I'm saying I am in service and devotion to life itself. The stories that I serve and that I carry will serve life. That means that they're going to infuse the space with connection, with joy, with maybe access to grief that you might not have had, which can give us more life. It might be a warning story to say, hey, look at the horrors that humanity has been capable of, so we don't have to repeat this. But if it's a sacred story, it's always going to take you home. It's not going to leave you in the bowels of hell. It's going to make sure that you have the skills and capacity, the hope, the inspiration to come back home and live in a new way. So sacred stories, it's not like they're airy fairy. I'm only when I feel good. It's like, don't mess with my vibe. No, that's not what a sacred story is. A sacred story is both connected to earth, and rooted to the earth and connected to spirit. And what I love as a sacred storyteller is, we are alchemists. We merge this energy between us, and then we give it life through the battery of our heart. We give it, connection to our core, and we bring it alive through our voice. And now we're able to shift and change matter. It's mind-blowing when you think about, what we are capable of as humans. And it's where we come into our role as creators. And so, are we conscious creators? Are we consciously creating a dream that we want to be part of? And that kind of sounds airy fairy, it's like that's new age, realm. And I love to speak at it from the old age realm, where all the ancients believed that all the ancient cultures agreed that the world was sung, spoken, and chanted into existence. So coming from the East Coast, when I, was coming to California and the glass is always half full, and I was just like, what's all the woo-woo stuff? It's our job to be a little critical, and can't help it from the Northeast. But it's when I started to learn that ancient knowledge, which was, oh, this is old knowledge to understand the power of our word, the power of our consciousness. And when we intentionally, infuse the volume of life with the dream that we most want to live in, we can speak it into being. And so right now we are so in need of sacred storytellers, of those in service to life, because I would say that our imagination's been hijacked,
Yeah.
and it's being hijacked and infused with ridiculous images of a future I personally don't want to end up in. And so one of the things I've come to understand as a storyteller is, if you aren't telling the story, if you aren't writing the story, if you aren't participating as an author and having authority over your life, then you could end up playing a role in someone else's story. And so
Oh,
then you
that's
come
really powerful. Yeah.
and so when you come back to that key question of, well, what is the storyteller in service to? And right now we're in service, we're surrounded by people who have somehow gotten infused with the virus of greed, and it's around us, and so when we have stories that are being breathed into being from that place, what role could you end up getting stuck in someone else's story? I don't know. One of the things I love is, Nelson Mandela has been so alive in my world right now, and talk about someone who never lost sight of the role in their own story.
Mm.
He never, even when he went into jail, he never played a different role. He was always who he was as an activist, as a change maker, as someone who was standing up for the dignity of his people. He always played that role, no matter what the external circumstances were. And I have to believe that he went through that to be able to infuse so many of us. And like, what a massive cultural phenomenon. So many of us have been touched by this one story. If he can do it there, surely I can do it here.
Yeah. Wow. I love this notion that you brought in about you spoke about, the wireless lines or energetic, whatever they are, bombarding you. But when you speak about stories, we are actually being bombarded by stories all the time. And you said it's all been hijacked, our imagination's been hijacked in the pursuit of greed, which is something that I has been resonating with me recently as I heard one of the 13 grandmothers, I think it was, speak about our enemy is greed. Um, and I had this sort of a vision of us actually, as we become aware of all these stories just flying at us, we have the choice to bat them away, just however way we want to, just no, no, no. And in that space, start to explore what it means to actually be conscious creators and sacred storytellers of our own life. And I wondered, you touched upon it at the beginning as well about as we get older, there's so many older women who feel that our voices are not heard. We become very reticent, perhaps a lot of older women do, in expressing ourselves. We can become very lost in knowing who we are and be sort of feel like we're endlessly seeking, but not actually arriving at any place that feels right for us. So how do we do this as elder wise women? How do we start to begin to tell our stories and not just buy into the narrative that they are irrelevant and past and
Yeah, we've been hypnotized, right? I mean, isn't it? I think there's only two species on the planet that where the female continues to stay alive after she's stopped menstruating. Do you know about that? I think
um,
it's like humans and whales or something.
yeah.
I'm not, don't correct me, and don't quote me on that. But it's like very few species of the women actually stay alive past that time of reproduction. And I'm new to this realm. I've got a little bit of my gray hair, which I'm so proud of. But it's I don't think I can really speak as an elder woman. I can speak as someone who's gotten the privilege to be around of elder women who are that piece that you're talking about, where we're never getting there. Where's the here? And it feels like we've been hypnotized, hypnotized by a culture that is, that functions off of that kind of energy,
Mhm.
and so, um, I live in LA, and it took me 3 years to see it, but every single block in the entire city has at least one, if not three businesses that are designed to augment how you look. I mean, it is so surreal to be in a complete city that's designed to help you change the way that you look from the outside. And which means that we've lost our relationship with that. That it's the inside that actually determines your beauty. I also live in Hawaii, and I love living there because there is a culture of gorgeous, beautiful older women with long white hair at the beach, swimming, surfing, like living, beautifully as older women. And I see them because they're so bright. And when I pass them and I look at their face, I'm not looking at the wrinkles. I'm looking at the bright light in their lives because they're still so alive. And so I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I I have to believe that there's a reason why um evolutionarily, I don't know if that's a word, our species has decided that the beings still live after their time of what is deemed as necessary reproduction. So we're here for more than just reproducing biologically. We're also here for the evolution of our consciousness. And I would say that as someone newly in my 50s, wow, has my consciousness shifted? It's really changed. And I have to imagine that it's because there's an inherent understood value that we have to give from this place. Where where we're not completely, obsessed with the hormones and what drives that reproductive nature. And now we have something so much more to give. And and I don't like the word mistake, because it makes a strange assumption of that. It's like if you're trying to live a life without making mistakes, and you're not living. I love working with little kids. I worked with these little kids, and we did this improv thing, and at the end of every chapter, the kid fell down. Then they got back up. And I was like, and they did this like 6 or 7 different times. And I was like, oh, these kids are like showing me kid genius, where they understand that when you play and you play hard, you fall down because that's part of it. And then you get back up. And when we're elders, we have that perspective. We've fallen down, we've gotten up, we've fallen down, we've gotten up, hopefully. There's no guarantees. And so those falling down moments, I consider those initiations. That's where life has come for you and has initiated you. And because we don't have a culture that acknowledges this anymore, I was just saying, it's like sometimes when we're getting initiated by life, it looks like we're in the boxing ring, and life is like bam, bam, bam. And what happens when we go in for a big boxing match? Well, we're gonna get stronger if we know how to play, if we can have the framing of, oh, this is an initiation, this is an entryway into my life. If I'm a gamer, I'm going to say, oh, I'm at the end of this game, so now I'm going to upgrade and up level, go to the next harder game. But you got to make it through the last passage, right? Or you keep just staying in that level. And so when we are older and we get to look back at our lives, and if we made it through, and not everybody does, initiations, no, not everybody makes it through alive. Yeah, our bodies might be functioning, but our soul might have gotten a little wrinkled or crinkled along the way, or not able to continue to move on. And we know people that have gone through this. We know people who have experienced major losses and weren't able to get back up on their feet. We know people who had their hearts broken and weren't able to open their hearts again. It's like this is a little bit of the walking dead among us. And when we are brave enough to tell our stories, when we are brave enough to share our life with other people, it sparks the life in others. We can bring people alive. And so when I come to tell you the story of, oh, how I made it through cancer, or how I made it through that broken heart, or how I made it to do that, look, if I'm just sitting here gabbing with you, Allison, as your friend, I might be like, oh my God, it's like I'm in this moment, But when I come to the threshold as a sacred storyteller, it's because I've done the good work to understand what was the journey of my soul. What did I have to learn from that experience? What did I glean? What did it call out in me? And now I get to give you the gift of my life. And it might have included some real pain and some anger and some rage and some loss and some heartbreak. And when I share all that, I'm sharing it because I'm on the other side of it, because I've done the great work of knowing that my life is a great big story filled with many chapters. And also when you get to look at your life like this, it's so much more fun, because even when you're going through the bowels where you're like, well, this will make great content, tell me the bigger story. It's like it gives you the capacity to put it all into context. And I think when we're older, it's like we understand. I've been in a women's group. We've been together for over 18 years, and we know each other's cycles now. And we can remind each other, like, oh yeah, there you go through the valley. Don't worry, you'll go up to the mountain, because you always go up to the mountain after the valley. It's like I've seen you do this like 6 times over 18 years, and it's great. It's a great gift to be able to give that to others. And so when we're at this certain age, our stories are so important.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, older women, we often talk about, we have this growing feeling that we want to contribute in terms of legacy. We want to offer some wisdom to younger generations, perhaps. And there's a lot that is involved in just that, just owning that, because a lot of women feel they want to do that, but they don't actually feel wise enough to offer anything yet. Also, there's a narrative, a dominant narrative, which focuses us on grandchildren. And yet there's so many women who don't have grandchildren. And those people can often be left feeling, well, I don't have this. So who do I talk to? Who is it that I talk to? So what would you say to those women?
It's so important to have something to take care of. It's what fulfills us. It's what completes us. And I say that as a single woman in my 50s. I don't have children, but I have learned that I have a couple of things where it's like, you got to know how to take care of something. Maybe it's your garden. Maybe it's your animals. I've always said you've got to take, excuse my language, you've got, at some point in your life, you've got to be able to clean up someone else's shit. It's a part of the humanness of evolution. It's a part of like getting you out of that narcissistic me realm. It's like life offers us certain initiations, and some people have children to go through those initiations of growing up, and some of us have different kinds of initiations of taking care of other things. One woman said this to me. She's like, I didn't have one child, I had 50 or 100 children. And it's like, and so when you know I finally came to realizing that, oh, my school, this is my family that I'm in charge of taking care of. And it's not easy, and it can be really stressful at times, and all the different aspects. But when I made that click of like, oh, this is the family that I am responsible for, it also changed my nature of being in terms of level of care. I don't know how to explain it other than that. And I think we all need to find something that we take care of, that we protect. And maybe that's the ocean. Maybe that's animals. Maybe that's our next door neighbor. I got to, one of my mentors was Barbara Abernathy, and I was working as a community organizer in a low income neighborhood that surrounded a big university. And I had this job of being the liaison between that neighborhood. And Barbara was the woman that was a community leader that lived in that neighborhood, and she was my partner. And when we walked down the neighborhood, she didn't have children, she wasn't married, but when we walked down the streets, every child was her child. And she was tough love. The kid didn't have his pants up, put your pants up. If he had a cigarette, put out that cigarette. She was like fierce, fierce grandma. And we don't have a culture that expects that anymore. It's harder to play that role when, in Hawaii, women of a certain age, they're aunties. They're expected to be aunties. You auntie all the kids. It's just known. In California, you talk to a kid that you don't know, and they think you're crazy.
Yeah.
So it's harder, but I feel like when we understand how much we're needed, we're desperately needed more than ever. Think about all of us who wish we'd had an auntie, or wish we'd had. There's one woman in my life, Ariel Stolzberg, who was the founder of 13 Moon Mystery Schools, and she would be a great person for this, by the way. And she adopted me, and she's like, I'm your fairy godmother. And I was like, oh my God, I can get adopted. Someone can claim me as their fairy godchild. And I had no idea. So I think also it's about claiming the role that we're in. Stephen Jenkinson says that elders are made by those around them. And that's really wonderful if people know how to find and look for and call out an elder. And he's, created this entire community of people who are beginning to do that around them. But for those that aren't surrounded by people like that, we actually have to claim the role and start practicing. And that's why I call myself a story practitioner. It's a practice. Lawyers practice, doctors practice, NBA stars practice. Why wouldn't we all be practicing living our greatest story, and understanding and practicing what roles we play? And so when we step into this role, how can we start looking around and say, well, who around me could use an auntie? Who around me could use a grandmother, or a fairy godmother, or a fairy god mermaid? What is your truest archetype? And offer that and claim it and then play it. And oftentimes people want to play back. So
That's so inspiring. And I just want to put in something that I believe is, which is that we don't necessarily need to focus exclusively on younger generations, because as you have said, when we share our story, it can ignite that spark in other people who have lost, who are feeling lost, and they can begin to sort of share their story, or realize that they have a story to tell as well. So, and this isolation that a lot of women feel when we get older, um, and having that fear of speaking to somebody you don't know, perhaps. But with this consciousness, with this approach that you're sharing today, it seems a lot more possible to bridge that goal because we're actually talking soul to soul and we're just offering something um, with the highest of intention. And perhaps it will be a breadcrumb, or perhaps it will be a breadcrumb that we never have any connection with anymore. But perhaps it will be something that is reciprocated in some way. And so you start to build up. Uh, I don't know, you just start to help people release the prisons that we construct around ourselves.
Love that piece around releasing the prisons that we construct around ourselves. I had this idea many years ago. I think the prisons of the future are going to be paradigm prisons, where we're just stuck in these different paradigms. In our stories, it's the golden key. It's the escape hatch out of one story and into another. And these moments that when life gets challenging and, who knows what's about to happen in the world. We've been warned, a change is coming, and that could be, some are being like, it's going to be bad. That's a story. It's there's going to be a shift, and maybe what we know will change. But perhaps all these, one of the stories that I think is fascinating is that they did all this research on England during World War II on those who were getting bombed, and they actually said it was the best years of their lives because the urgency, the closeness, the intimacy was brought them very close together. Now, look, I'm not going to wish for bombings or anything like that, but what I like about this is that it gives us more context where it's all about how we choose to live in each moment. And for this wisdom story piece that you're speaking to, and this piece about getting lost, I I have a little ingredient for how to create a wisdom story, and this is a recipe book for how to do it. And so a wisdom story, it's often like something that kind of sucked. It's like you earn your wisdom, right? And so pick a moment that in life that really sucked, and it's great that in you it still feels like it sucked. Okay, this is for people who say I don't have any wisdom. This is how you're going to do that. It's like, look, we earn our wisdom because we work for it, because our life is worth reflecting on. That's how we get the wisdom. It didn't always come in the moment, right? So you pick a moment that really sucked, and now because it's a sacred story, it's bigger than us. This is a story of our soul, and it's a story of us. Right. And so we're starting to understand that there was a big story that lived through me. And now I'm going to listen for that big story. So there has to be a release of the ego. You have to say, I'm willing to give up my ego. And you have for something to be truly a wisdom story, you have to be willing to surrender being right. Okay, this is a big deal. So if you're right, that person's wrong, they're just going to be a jerk forever. You're right. You do not have wisdom to share right now. Okay. So it's like, but if you're willing to just try it on, just practice saying, my ego is not going to tell the story because the wisdom story is not exactly what happened, right? It's me with context and perspective. It's me making the constellation of a big journey. That's going to become a wisdom story. It's not this, and this happened. That's something else. So if I know that my moment that really sucked is this, when I got diagnosed with cancer, that sucked, and that was the initiation. Now I'm changing the framework. I'm saying, okay, well, this is a framework of life was initiating me. Okay, so now I'm in a completely different conversation. That takes me out of victimhood. That takes me out of all the stuff. That puts me into a completely different conversation. And so it's like, oh, I just up leveled to a whole different conversation about my life and who I am and how the world's working for me. So if we say, okay, you go to the point where the thing sucked, and then the first place that you go to is, where did this story really begin? Where did the story really begin? So for me, my story didn't begin on the day that I was diagnosed with cancer. My story began when I was 4 years old, and there was this tapestry in my bedroom, and it was hand woven by one of my mom's friends, and it was of this woman who had a flower shop, and she was giving away flowers to children, and it said, "Give what you have, Leah, to someone else. It may mean more than you dare to think." And I was just a little kid learning how to read. So I read it over, and my name was embroidered into it. Give what you have, Leah. I'm like, oh my God. So I read it over and over and over and over again. I didn't have a clue of what that meant until I was 29 years old, sitting across the desk from a man who had just said he was going to operate in 10 days, cut across my throat, possibly destroy my larynx, and I might never have a voice again. And all of a sudden, I knew what I had. So again, if I was just trying to tell you the story of cancer, I wouldn't tell you about that moment. I don't know. This is when the muse comes in. This is when you get inspired. This is when something bigger than you starts to talk through you. And so again, I honestly think that being a sacred storyteller is one of the easiest gigs in town if you know how to get rid of your ego and just say, use me. Use this vessel to be the vessel of life and speak through me. May the spirit of life that's in service to life speak through me. And that's a really critical point, because you don't want to just say, I just let any old thing come through me. No, 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 no. There's all different kinds of things that are trying to get through. So you do want to create a nice, clear, energetic. This is what we teach in class. It's like, how do you create that nice, clear, energetic boundary? And how do you be super clear for what your vessel will carry? And so you want to be so clear with your intention um, when you open to that kind of inspiration. And so, another piece, so it's like you need to know where your story really began and allow yourself to be inspired. Someone told me, she's like, it's began in 2 lifetimes behind me. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't know that. That's so cool. She's like, neither did I. That's so great. So it's like, allow yourself to be in awe and surprised by your story. Then you want to come to the point where, the thing happened. And when you look at it as an initiation, and when you look at, okay, well, what was your initiation? And rarely do we know in the moment. This is with perspective. And so for me, what was in the moment, we're looking for those universal themes, the ones that are bigger than us. So for me, one thing that you might not know about me is that up until that point, I had mastered the role of victim. There were a lot of things that had happened in my life. I learned all the roles. It was how I got my attention. It's like it was just a lot of things and had gotten so entrenched in me that it became a habit. And I would out victim story anybody in the room. It became a sport. And so all of a sudden, when I was diagnosed with cancer, they told me I could lose my voice. It was as if the doctor was coming at me with this, like, the purple velvet pillow with a tiara of victimhood, giving it to me. And something came online, and I was like, not me, not today, not ever again. No. And when I said that, when something in my soul activated, this was not my ego. I got to say, this was something else came on board. I was barely knowing what was happening in the moment. It was like this escape hatch opened in the room, and I jumped through. Some part of me was ready and willing to go. And I said, yes. And I jumped through. And rather than sit there sobbing, all of a sudden, I had a new role that was coming on board. I didn't know the lines, but she was really funny and she cracked jokes about everything. So when he said I was going to lose my voice, I said, I bet you say that to all the pretty girls, don't you? What? I don't know. I don't know who was saying that. It's like I don't even think I thought of myself as pretty, but some other part of me was ready to come alive, and I gave her one breath to work with, and she grabbed the reins. And then my job began to find a way to laugh with every single person I came into contact with, every time I had to go have my blood drawn, every doctor that I met. Look, I was filled with fear and terror. I was so afraid. But then some part of me was so ready to meet the moment. And these kinds of moments are extraordinary. Health crises are extraordinary. It's very few moments in life that I can say are black and white. You know what is life force giving, and you know what is life force taking. And it's not going to be like that forever, that you'll be able to see it like that. Everyone has their own experiences. But for me, that's what the experience was.
Yeah.
And also, you really get to see who's on your side. You don't always get to see everyone who's on your side. So anyway, so we'll go on, it's like, but there are other parts of the wisdom story. You always want to see everyone's got a Yoda, a fairy godmother. They're always going to be there in every part of your story. So listen for what got you through, because that's also going to be it. I had a garden. A garden got me through, that I
Wow.
prayed with every day. So these are little bits and pieces of ideas of how to start to listen for and catch your wisdom story.
Wow. Wow. I mean, that's given us so much to connect into and to reflect upon and just sort of let it wash into us so that we can absorb it. And, it feels wonderful. And perhaps this is a good time to, move into the offerings that you have because, people are going to be, especially after you've shared, these beginning bits of moving into the wisdom story is, people are going to be saying, okay, this sounds really, um, uh, I want to say, what do I want? Not enticing, like delicious, a bit sort of delicious. Like, yeah, I want another taste of that. And so, how do people find out more about what you do and and share about your offerings that you've got?
Yes, thank you for inviting me to do so. If you want to learn more about sacred storytelling and the perspective from this corner of the universe about what that means, and I feel like there's a lot of different perspectives, but from over here, I for your beautiful summit, I'm offering a bundle of 4 different 1-hour classes for free. Normally there's a $37 charge, but for you guys for free. Other things that are happening is that I have a monthly membership, and we meet 3 times a month. And we're meeting today because it's the new moon, and every new moon, I do a new moon oracle story. So one of my gifts is that I do something called soul stories, where it's an ancient form of divination, storytelling divination. So I do that for individuals, and once a month I do it for our collective. And that you can learn all about our monthly membership. And then also in September, I have a new course coming up, and we're actually going to be focusing on creating wisdom stories. So the course is called The Alchemy of Story, and we go through 5 different modules, and we travel through 5 different ways of telling your story. And it's for people who specifically want to use story as a tool for healing, either for themselves or if they're really ready to say, hey, I really have something to give. I'm a pillar of support during these times, and I want to amplify that capacity. We have a certification program so that I'll give you all the links.
Yeah. Wow. So everybody, it does sound delicious, doesn't it? So the information and links are right down here. So do go there now, allow this to speak to you and you'll know if it does. And then follow that inner wisdom, follow that intuitive guidance and go and explore because if you click on the links, you'll get through to more information than we've got on the page. And then you can just feel into, okay, this is something I'd like to do. This is something I'd like to do, if that's how you feel. But I strongly recommend that you do it now because if you don't, you'll be thinking about it at a time like when you can't get to your computer or your device or whatever, like in the middle of the night, and it's all in front of you right now. So now is the time to do it. Leah, this has just been so wonderful. And I'm going to say the word again, delicious. It has been really delicious and inviting. It is like being invited into this wonderland that we can step into and connect with other people and also really discover ourselves in that along the path. I'm getting a clear image of like walking along a path in a forest with wonderment. And it just has been fascinating and so relevant to us women as we age. I just think this is phenomenal. So I want to really thank you for coming and sharing about this today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Such a joy. You have such a beautiful presence, and you evoked such a fantastic conversation. And I really, really appreciate all that you're doing. And also just giving a place for us to remember how valuable our lives are. And that when we give them, it doesn't just stay in this moment. It passes through time. I got inspired just to share one tiny little story to end us with, and it's just a little metaphor. And metaphors, they say that spirits speak to us through metaphors, and we receive our metaphors through the expression of story. And I was with a dear friend, and she has this little white fluffy dog. This little white fluffy dog is living its best life. They go everywhere. It goes on boats, it goes on trains, it goes on planes. It's like it goes everywhere. It is loved and adored and appreciated, and she loves and adores and appreciates everyone with her. And I was like, wow, if I get to come back as a dog, that's the one. And I was like, how'd you get her? And she said, well, she was lost. She was lost on this highway and she was running up and down this highway for 3 days. Someone saw her running up and down the highway and they finally picked her up. They brought her to the SPCA. And when I showed up, she came and she claimed me. And it really struck me as when we're lost, may we all find ourselves, may we have the good wisdom to place ourselves where we can get found. So we can actually find the place where we most want to be and live in the best form of our expression. I feel like in stories, we can find ourselves. We can find ourselves, we can find others. There's this resonance that comes through it. So may I leave you like tell your stories. It's the greatest gift you have to give. So thank you, thank you.
Wow, what a way to finish. So, everyone, thank you for joining us today. I know that you'll have loved this as much as I have. And do remember, information and links are below here. And a final thank you again to you, Leah. Thank you.